Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday, January 4, Sioux Falls City Council meeting. I want to welcome Troop 371. You guys want to wave to the councilors over here? All right, there they are. I told them, you guys can come and go as you want. You don't have to stay all night. We'll probably be here like 2 in the morning, so, okay? On a school night. We'll go ahead and get started by reading our roll call, please.
Council members Kylie.
Here.
Neitzert.
Here.
Selberg.
Here.
Sale.
Here.
Starr.
Here.
Brecky. Here. Erickson.
Here.
Jensen.
Here. All right, Councilor Erickson's joining us remote. Everyone else is here in person this evening. I'm going to give the floor to Councilor Jensen real quick for a personal privilege item before we move on to our invocation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take a moment on behalf of the City Council and our City Clerk to recognize our Assistant City Clerk, Tamara. She has been with the city for 20 years of service, and just after we adjourn tonight, and we might do it a little bit beforehand, we have a nicely minted service recognition coin for you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for making these, but we wanted to present this to you and celebrate your service to the city of Sioux Falls. 20 years is a very long time, and you've done a really good job since I've known you, and before I was even elected, you were always very kind to me. So I appreciate that. You're a professional, and thank you for your work. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
May I say a few words?
Yes, that'd be
Okay,
great.
well, first of all, I didn't know this was going to happen, but I got a little suspicious around 4 o'clock today, so I just wrote a few words. So thank you all so much for the in-person congratulations, the emails, the cards, the chocolates, and the gift certificates. Also want to say thank you to my coworkers, past and present, but especially Denise and Tom, for undying patience. He's going to read the rest.
For your undying patience, professionalism, and friendship. Thank you for all the wonderful co-workers throughout the city, and thank you to the mayors and the city council members I've worked with throughout the years. In closing, I would like to say that it is very easy to shine when you've been surrounded by gold, and I'm extremely lucky to have been working in a Fort Knox for the last 7,302 days. Thank you again.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Tamara. Appreciate that. All right, with us tonight to give our invocation, Pastor Rick Carlson with Prairie Hills Covenant Church is back with us for that. So I'd ask that you rise for the invocation and then stay standing for our Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, it's a new year with all kinds of memories of what has happened in 2021, and now we look to a new year with challenges that are before this council, with opportunities that they will pursue. We ask that you would give them wisdom and strength, courage to make good decisions based on what you say to them, that they would listen well to each other and listen well to the community. We give you thanks for this great place that we get to live and pray your blessing upon Sioux Falls. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, Pastor Rick, for leading us in our invocation tonight. That being done, we'll move on to item 4, which is our consent agenda. Any changes to be made there?
Move approval.
Second, Jensen.
Okay, motion by Selberg, seconded by Jensen to approve the consent agenda. Discussion on that? All right, let's vote, please.
Council members Kylie.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. We'll move on to our next item of business, item 24 then, our regular agenda. Look for a motion there, please.
Move approval, Jensen.
Second, Kylie.
Okay, motion by Jensen, seconded by Kylie to approve the agenda. Any discussion there? All right, let's vote on that one, please.
Councilmembers Kylie.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, that's going to pass 8-0 as well. Next item.
Next item is 25, new 21-22 retail malt beverage, South Dakota farm wine license, and new 2022 retail wine and cider license for Blown Away Vaping Incorporated, 2011 South Minnesota Avenue with conditional use permit CU 01430-2021 being approved on December 1st, 2021, pending change in use permit issuance. Item 26 is a new 2021-22 retail malt beverage South Dakota farm wine license and new 2022 retail wine and cider license for Bodian LLC Swamp Daddy's Cajun Chicken, 421 North Phillips Avenue, Suite 115, CUP not required. Item 27 is new 2021 retail malt beverage South Dakota farm wine license and new 2022 retail wine and cider license for Fasika Restaurant LLC, 301 South Garfield Avenue, Suite 10, CUP not required. Item 28 is a new 2021-22 retail malt beverage South Dakota farm wine license, a new 2022 retail wine and cider license for South Dakota Hookah Lounge LLC, 301 South Garfield Avenue, Suite 8, with conditional use permit CU 15511-2021 being approved on December 1st, 2021, pending change in use permit issuance. Item 29 is request to add video lottery terminals with the 2021-22 retail malt beverage license for TJS LLC, JJ's Axes and Ales, 3016 West 57th Street, CUP not required. 30 is a special one-day malt beverage license, special one-day malt beverage and special one-day wine licenses for American Cancer Society to be operated at 4501 East Arrowhead Parkway, Suite 101 for a fundraiser on January 15th, 2022. Special one-day liquor license for T-Slat Incorporated to be operated at JJ's Axes and Ales, 3016 West 57th Street for a Christmas party on January 8th, 2022. Item 32 is a special one-day liquor license for T-Slat Incorporated to be operated at 5 Oaks Event Hall, 480 East 69th Street for a Roaring Twenties event on January 22nd, 2022.
All right, thank you, Tamara. Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Jamie Palmer with licensing, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have on items 25 through 32. And I do see a couple of the applicants in the audience, so if you have any questions, they may be able to help you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anyone here to speak on any of these items tonight from the public? All right, council, do you have any questions for Jamie on items 25 to 32? Okay, look for a motion here.
Move approval.
Second, Jensen.
Okay, motion by Selberg, seconded by Jensen to approve these items. Any discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none, let's take a vote on it, please.
Council members Kylie.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. Next item.
Next item is 33, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, rezoning property located at 2508-2809 North Bent Grass Court from the MH Manufactured Housing District to the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District number 15381-2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. The Planning Commission recommends approval 6-0. Private applicant, Southeastern Development Foundation, Lynn Keller Forbes.
Jason, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Jason Bieber representing Planning and Development Services. This is an application by Southeast Council of Governments. It's located up on North Bentgrass Avenue, which is east of North Marion Road. It's about 7.7 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is that this will allow a little bit more flexibility with some rear yard and front yard setbacks for some new single-family homes. They do have some floodplain challenges along these lots.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Council, you got any questions here for Jason?
Move approval.
Second, Jensen.
All right, motion by Nitzert, seconded by Jensen. Any discussion there? All right, let's vote on that, please.
Councilmembers Kylie,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Star.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
That passes 8-0. Next item.
Item 34 is a second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota rezoning property located at 3000 West Allegar Place from the RS Single Family Residential Suburban District to the RT1 Single Family Residential Traditional District, number 15392, 2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. The Planning Commission recommends approval 6-0. Private applicants, Deffenbaugh Construction Incorporated, Jesse Deffenbaugh.
The applicant here is Jesse Deffenbaugh. The owner is David Rosinski. It's located at 3000 West Algar Place. It's about 0.56 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is the applicant is looking at constructing a new home on this lot that's less than 50 feet wide.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone from the public here to speak on this one tonight? Council questions here? Look for a motion.
Move approval, Jensen.
Second, Kylie.
Motion by Jensen, seconded by Kylie. Any discussion on that? All right, let's vote on it, please.
Councilmembers Kylie,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Star.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, that's going to pass 8-0. Item 35.
Item 35 is a second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota rezoning property located at 5055 East Grant Street from the S1 General Institutional District and RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban District to the C2 Commercial Neighborhood and Streetcar District, number 15400, 2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. The Planning Commission recommends approval 6-0. Private applicants, Willardson Lund Engineering, Eric Willardson.
The applicant here is Eric Wilson. The owner is Assam Companies. It's located north of East Arrowhead Parkway and west of South Foss Avenue. It's about 2.2 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning is the applicant is looking at combining these properties with the existing C2 properties to the south and east.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone from the public want to speak on this one tonight? Council, you got any questions here? Look for a motion, please.
Move approval, Jensen.
Second, Sale.
Okay, motion by Jensen, seconded by Counselor Sale. Any discussion there? All right, let's vote on that, please.
Councilmembers Kylie,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Star.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
That passes 8-0. Next item.
Item 36 is a second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota rezoning a portion of the property located at 5100 East 69th Street from the RD2 Townhome Residential Suburban District to the RS Single Family Residential Suburban and RD1 Twin Home Duplex Residential Suburban Districts, number 15439, 2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. The Planning Commission recommends approval. Private applicants, Schmitz, Calda and Associates Incorporated, Kim Buell.
The owner of this is Ronning Companies. It's located north of East 69th Street and east of South Sycamore Avenue. It's about 27.5 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning, the applicant's looking to construct a single-family and twin home residential development.
Anyone from the public here to speak on this one tonight? Council, you got any questions for Jason here?
Move approval.
Second, Sale.
Motion by Selberg, seconded by Sale to approve item 36. Any discussion there? All right, let's vote, please.
Councilmembers Kylie,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Star.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
That passes 8-0. Next item.
Item 37 is a second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota rezoning property located at 6301 East 33rd Street from the RD2 Townhome Residential Suburban District to the RA1 Apartment Residential Low Density District, number 15446, 2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. Planning Commission recommends approval 6-0. Private applicants, Powder House Apartments LLC, Josh Kruger.
The applicant and owner is Powder House Apartments. It's located east of South Veterans Parkway and south of East 33rd Street. It's about 1.72 acres in size. The purpose of this rezoning, the applicant is looking to construct 3 5-unit and then 1 3-unit townhome buildings on the lot.
Anyone from the public here to speak on 37? Got any questions tonight for Jason on this development? All right, let's look for a motion here.
Move to approve?
Second, Jensen.
Okay, motion by Kylie, seconded by Counselor Jensen. Any discussion there? All right, let's vote on it, please.
Councilmembers Kylie,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
That passes 8-0. Item 38.
Item 38 is the second reading and ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota rezoning property located at 3801 South Elmwood Avenue from the C3 Commercial Community District to the RA3 Apartment Residential High Density District, number 15507-2021, and amending the official zoning map of the City of Sioux Falls. The Planning Commission recommends approval, 6-0. Private applicant is Bob Natz.
The applicant has requested that we defer this one to the January 31st City Council meeting. They need to do a little bit more due diligence on the proposed project before the rezoning goes through.
Do we have a January 31st city council meeting?
Yes.
We do?
Yes.
Monday?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, from February 1. All right, just don't want to screw up the motion here. All right, anyone from the public here to speak on that one? Counselor Neitzer, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to defer agenda item 38 to the meeting of Monday, January 31, 2022.
All right, motion by Neitzer, seconded by Kylie to defer. Any discussion on that motion? Let's vote on it, please.
Councilmembers Kylie,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, passes 8-0. We'll move to item 39.
Item 39 is a first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota authorizing the mayor to enter into a lease between the City of Sioux Falls and Zeal doing business as Startup Sioux Falls. Recommendations set a date of second reading for Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. Sponsor is the mayor.
Sean, good evening.
Good evening, Sean Pritchett, Director of Finance. Before you this evening, it's the first reading of an ordinance. This authorizes the mayor to sign a lease between the City of Sioux Falls and Zeal, doing business as Startup Sioux Falls, whereby Startup Sioux Falls would be leasing the currently vacant building owned by the city, previously used for the Parks and Rec Department administrative offices until they relocated to the city center. To assist in your consideration of this request, I'll briefly give you a brief history of the building and its use, discuss the benefits of the occupancy by Startup Sioux Falls, and follow that by highlighting some of the specific terms related to the lease that's in front of you for authorization tonight. As you can see here a little bit on the map, I think most of you are probably familiar with where this building is located, but for public purposes, you can see that it's on the corner of 6th Avenue and, 6th and Phillips Avenue. It's directly to the south of the Levitt and adjacent to it. The Parks building, or the former Parks building there, you can see pictured there at the top. As I noted before, it was formerly utilized by the Parks and Rec admin office until their relocation to the city center. So it has been vacated since that time period. It's being currently maintained in its current state by centralized facilities, which is part of the Department of Finance. Just quick history of this. It was constructed back in 1894 as a historic building built with quartzite in the Richardsonian Romanesque style, utilized as a freight depot for the offices of the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad from 1894 until it ceased to be utilized for that in 1980. It was converted at that time to a training facility, and it was owned by Raven in 1993. The city took possession of this property in 2004 as part of an exchange agreement with Raven at that time, where we exchanged some land that we no longer needed from the city that was north of Sioux Falls that they were using as part of Raven's, I believe, manufacturing and so forth. And in exchange for that, we received this building from Raven, but it was also tied to a long-term lease agreement for 75 of the spaces. That was recently redone, I think, back in 2018. Came in front of this council as a 40-year lease for those spaces. We'll talk about that here just a little bit more in a few minutes. Talking about the benefits of occupancy by Startup Sioux Falls. One of the key things is it promotes activation of a currently underutilized building owned by the city. and really creating some activation and programming leading up to Falls Park, the Levitt, and the Steel District that will be forthcoming here over the next several years. Startup Sioux Falls helps facilitate new businesses and the creation of high-paying jobs in our Sioux Falls area, and I think we can all agree that that's a positive goal to achieve. And it would provide a modern meeting space, common area that could be utilized not just for events that Startup Sioux Falls is hosting, but for other events, as well as we have allowed for 6 events to be hosted by the City of Sioux Falls as needed within that site if deemed necessary. Startup Sioux Falls is looking to spend approximately $1 million to remodel the interior of the building. The interior is pretty dated and is tired, and so this would completely revitalize an important historic building in our downtown area and in an area of our community that's growing. If you're familiar with Startup Sioux Falls, I believe they kind of started out as the South Dakota Technology and Business Center as a partnership, I think, between Ford Sioux Falls and the Chamber of Commerce. And over time that has evolved, being renamed Zeal, and then most recently to Startup Sioux Falls, but their current and previous location at the South Dakota Business Technology Center really was intended to provide some space and shared support services for new business startups in the community. And over the past, I think 20 years or so since that was first constructed, we have evolved in the needs for our small business and the type of support that they need. The age of the internet, social marketing, social media has changed the way we start and do business. And with that, Startup Sioux Falls is evolving as well. And the need for all of that space, and that being a core tenet of what they did, has changed over that time too. Whereas now our entrepreneurs need synergy, connectivity, they need education, and they need relationship building. This building, bringing it downtown, brings them closer to more business startups, as well as where a lot of our entrepreneurs in a setting that they want to be involved in. I do want to mention we do have a number of representatives from Startup Sioux Falls here tonight. Brianne Manor, the executive director, as well as a couple of board members, Matt Paulson, as well as Bill Anderson, who is the board chair, and then Jeff Griffin is also here from the Greater Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, and they would be able to entertain any questions that you might have when we get to that stage. In terms of some of the key programs to provide some familiarity with what Startup Sioux Falls currently does, they have a number of programs that are listed here. Co-Starters program with 50+ business graduates in 21. They operate a mentorship program of peer entrepreneurs assisting other entrepreneurs. They host over 50+ events and business training events. That will be a key component of being able to be located in this building. They will continue to provide limited co-working space for synergistic type of organizations to co-locate with them, and they will provide connection to our venture capital for new business startups looking to start in our community. To talk about some of those lease provisions, so the lease includes the building, the steps, the ramp, the deck, and the loading dock area. So just really that specific building itself, as well as a use agreement on some of the parking spaces, which I'll touch upon here briefly. It is a 10-year term lease, so it would expire on December 31st of 2031. However, we built in a couple of options for the city to buy out the lease if we deem it appropriate, starting in the 6th year. So it will be about 1 year under construction, and then they'll have about a 5-year that they'll have a commitment to the lease. For the remaining 5 years, the city would have the option to buy it out at an escalating factor, reimbursing them for the actual cost of improvements on a pro rata basis, depending on what year, if we chose to do that. Otherwise, the lease does terminate on December 31st of 2031 after 10 years, and there's not an option to extend after that time period. I think you may have questions as to why the nominal lease in regard to this building. In terms of some of the responses I would give to that, first, the building has remained vacant. There's no planned or needed purpose presently for the state for this facility as far as for city purposes. It's a historic building, so being able to work in partnership with Startup Sioux Falls allows the opportunity to preserve an important historic building in our community, as well as make a fairly significant investment into the interior. I would say that buildings like car engines are better maintained when they're utilized. So anybody who's had a car engine or any sort of engine that's sat aside for a couple of years, probably is not going to run very well. They like to be run on a regular basis, and buildings are not dissimilar from this. They like to be occupied, and I think that is a policy that this council kind of got behind in terms of revisiting the vacant building ordinance here within the last couple of months. It's better for the mechanical system. It better takes care of the building when they are occupied. They're better heated, and all of that. The common space will allow for the programming and activation that we would like to see in this vicinity of downtown, especially when you see all the developments that will be happening in this area. We want more programming, more activation, more walkability in this area. And finally, it does support business and economic development. This growth creates direct benefits to our city, not just in attracting new businesses and entrepreneurship and new residents for our community, but it also translates directly to the city in additional tax dollars, which the city is recipient of. In terms of other lease provisions that are built into this, it does include that event space I spoke of, which can be utilized for the city at no cost up to 6 times annually during the term of this lease. The city has prior written consent for any tenants that would sublease or license space within this facility. We would do that from an administrative standpoint. And this is built in there to ensure that those that are being subleased or licensed space are synergistic organizations whose mission correlates with that of Startup Sioux Falls. It does allow for parking. It would allow for 13 spaces to be used for exclusive use by the tenant and occupants of the building, and then we would have 4 spaces that would be used on a shared basis with the city. And this would be 5 a.m. through 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if you see kind of those brownish shaped or brownish colored spaces, those are all the ones that are subject to the Raven lease. That's 75 spaces there. The green spaces, those would be the ones that would be utilized exclusively by the occupants of the building. The orange spaces there are the 4 shared use spaces, and then the city retains ownership or exclusivity over the blue spaces you see that really come up against the Levitt. Important to be keeping those for city purposes, especially during the Levitt season for loading and unloading coming out of that area. The lease does allow for Startup Sioux Falls to have naming rights for the building, and they can utilize that to help support fundraising to fund the improvements that they're looking to do for the building, which is currently in the early stages of design. This, of course, still has to follow all the city ordinances as a city building, so it will follow the naming ordinance and come to the council for final approval, and it would come through committee just as any of our facilities would have. The tenant responsibilities overall, the tenant is responsible for all interior improvements, and at this time it's expected to run about $1 million. They'll be responsible for all routine repairs and maintenance to the interior space and mechanical systems during the term of the lease, something that we're subject to currently from the city's perspective. They'll also pay all utility expenses related to the building, something the city is presently doing. They are required to provide an annual report summarizing the use and implementation of the premises by July 15th annually, and would also allow the opportunity, if requested, to come before the council to kind of provide an update as to what Startup Sioux Falls is doing and some of their activities. And then they will handle all snow removal of the sidewalks and pedestrian pathways at the site. The Raven Industries, because of their lease agreement with the city, is responsible for all maintenance of the parking lot and snow clearing of the parking lot. As far as city responsibilities, well, we will be responsible for maintaining most of the envelope of the exterior of the building. Not unlike what you would expect from many landlords. So maintaining the foundation, the exterior walls, exterior concrete, and the roof. We will be looking as, if this is approved as they go forward, we'll be taking a look at the tuck pointing, because we're probably at a point where we need to make some tuck pointing repairs to the building. And then it has a fairly new roof, so we're not expecting that there'll be significant expenses related to the roof. Parks Department will continue to maintain the landscaping and lawn maintenance. There's not a lot of lawn there. Also, from a public perspective, it's really difficult to tell where our park system begins and where it doesn't. And so for consistency and quality of the landscaping and so forth, we'll continue to maintain that portion. We will review and approve all building plans for tenant improvements. And as I noted earlier, we will approve all tenant subleases of the office space. As far as the timeline, if this is approved, they're presently working on initial designs, but they'll go heavier into the design, permitting, and eventually bidding the project, and expecting interior construction to last from about May through December, with the hope that they would be able to occupy the space toward the end of this year or early next year. And with that, I'd be happy to hopefully answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone from the public here to speak on item 39 tonight?
Sierra Broussard, Sioux Falls. There's going to be quite a few citizens here for the second half of this reading, of the second reading here. You know how I am with the rich elite people in the city of Sioux Falls here, and so there's a difference between rich people and rich elite people. And I usually don't support downtown stuff at all, you know, because I'm on a different level. The people that is behind this has not offered a tip, has not gotten a tip on any of their projects. Isn't that amazing? The citizens say, well, rich people that do all of this stuff gets tips behind everything. These people, one of these individuals that has put in millions of dollars of property in this city has not come forward with a tip. So when people's going to come to second reading on this, I want them to remember when they're going to be talking to think about who's behind this. I always talk about a rising crime in a neighborhood. When we have buildings like this that are vacant, that puts crime in a neighborhood. Some people say, well, the city should sell. Well, you know what? We can't get Hy-Vees to sell property on East 10th Street. You can't make people sell properties. That's just how it is. The city wants to hold their land and property. That's wonderful. $1 for 10 years, and they're going to put $1 million out of, now I want people to hear me. They're going to put $1 million out of their pocket. There's no kickback on this. There's no tips involved in this. And if anybody's going to lose out on this, it's going to be the people that put money into this building. I want people to realize that this is very good to support this. I'm struggling with citizens here on when they're going to come to public input on second reading. I'll be here for second reading. I'm going to support this. I'm going to support Matt Paulson. This man has gave me nothing, but what he gave me was his knowledge and his advice and his wisdom. I think if people would get to know Matt Paulson and people with zeal before they judge and sit down and talk to these individuals, then they're going to see the same perspective as I do. Again, these people that are behind this has not asked the city for a TIF.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this? Come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm John Matthews from Sioux Falls. And I'd like to seriously question this proposal as to whether or not it's really the best use of a taxpayer-owned asset. The city routinely disposes of unused assets, such as machinery and implements and that kind of thing. And although this is a fixed asset and considerably more valuable, I question as to why this should be any different. We don't have a very good taste in our mouth from recent public-private partnerships. And I question why this one should be implemented as a lease. I question whether anybody else has had any other entities have had the opportunity to bid on this lease. And also, I think the taxpayers might very well benefit the greatest if the building was put up for sale, if it's no longer used by the city of Sioux Falls. I think this is an example of a want versus a need. Startup Sioux Falls already has a home. They apparently, from the news coverage that I've read, they own it with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation and the Chamber of Commerce. If Zeal would like to move, they could have their two partners in the existing Career Avenue building buy them out and start up Sioux Falls could purchase this building. The parties to this proposal are well known to one another with prior business and political relationships. I urge you to take this opportunity and slow this proposal down and avoid any appearance of impropriety. Let's explore all the options available to start up Sioux Falls in rent versus buy this building and answer a lot of questions that remain unknown at this point. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak on this tonight? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. I'm Brian Maynor. I am the Executive Director of Startup Sioux Falls, and I just want to take a moment and reflect upon the remarkable investment and foresight our city leadership has had nearly 20 years ago when they decided to invest in entrepreneurship by allocating resources to build the South Dakota Technology and Business Center, now known as the Zeal Center for Entrepreneurship. Our 45,000 square foot incubation facility is intended to spur economic development through startup activity. It wasn't necessarily a safe or popular bet at the time 2 decades ago, but where would our city be without it? We might possibly be without a MetaPayment systems, a DocuTap, an SAB biotherapeutics, and millions of dollars in economic activity spurred through investing resources into supporting startup and entrepreneurial ventures across the Sioux Falls region. We've done a fine job of putting our great city on the map in so many ways, but the investment to cultivate the vibrant startup ecosystem we see today has prepared us for a huge cultural and societal shift, largely amplified by the pandemic. In 2020, 4.38 million small business applications were submitted across the country. That's a 24% increase from 2019 and the biggest increase of the past decade by a mile. Our organization has never seen more interest in entrepreneurship than in the past year, which is marked by our annual report, and that, as was noted earlier, 50 entrepreneurs have gone through our accelerator program to date, as well as over 100 individuals we've served through consultations and mentorship connections. Additionally, our organization was bestowed an incredible gift through the SBA Community Navigators Grant, funded by the American Rescue Plan, which awarded us up to $1 million over the next 2 years to support underserved communities by providing accelerator programming and additional business resources to across the state of South Dakota. We don't take this opportunity lightly, and our communities are growing and diversifying rapidly, and we intend to build upon the momentum that the grant award is offering us to build an even stronger and more vibrant ecosystem for everyone to access, no matter the barrier. This great opportunity to move downtown is the final step in our organization's evolution to meet today's entrepreneur where they're at and provide more accessibility and visibility to those wanting to start something new or collaborate with individuals to work through issues using an innovative and entrepreneurial mindset. I can promise you that this investment will be just as pivotal, if not more so, than your original investment in the SBD TBC. As I've continued to meet with leaders across the city, it's evident additional benefits and outcomes for continued investment in the healthy development of our startup community could include, and I'll hurry up here, opportunities to collaborate with you folks to talk about issues in our community such as food
Thanks,
deserts,
Brian.
public health and safety.
I gotta cut you off.
Sorry, I
Appreciate
didn't know I
it.
was gonna go so long.
You can
Thank you.
speak on it again next week, though.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Anyone else here to speak on this item? Come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. Matt Paulson. I'm a board member at Startup Sioux Falls. I like to think of economic development as a three-legged stool. You have attracting new businesses to Sioux Falls. That's what the Development Foundation does. You have servicing our existing businesses. That's what the Chamber does. And then you have new business formation. That is what Startup Sioux Falls does. Startup Sioux Falls is the entity when somebody has a dream, somebody has an idea, and says, hey, I want to do this. What's my next step? You come to Startup Sioux Falls, and Startup Sioux Falls provides kind of the advice and resources and kind of points you in the direction to go to start your business. We've had over 50 businesses go through our Co-Starters program this year, and that is going to grow over time. We just got $1 million grant to expand that. to underserved communities, and that's going to be really exciting as that happens. So as you guys are aware, the Chamber of Commerce and Development Foundation get a little bit of money every year from the City Council, and that is not the case with Startup Sioux Falls. We're not here asking for a handout. We're here asking to say, hey, you have this awesome downtown building. You're not doing anything with it. How about you let us put $1 million into it and make it into a real community asset for the city? So that's why we're here today. I've heard some of the comments online. People say this is a handout, but if you do the math, it's really not a handout, because you have a 6,000 square foot building. The market rate rent on it would be $15 to $20 a square foot. So the market rate rent would be about $90,000 to $120,000 a year. Over 10 years, that adds up to about $1 million. And what do you know? We're putting $1 million into the building. So it really is more about, we're putting a lot of money into this project that you guys as the city are going to benefit from. So I would think about that, and maybe not pay as much credence to the, we're giving out a handout to Zeal or the mayor's buddies or whatever people are going to say on the internet. This is really, nobody's making money off this deal. This is a deal that will benefit people that want to start businesses in the community, and that's who we're here to help. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Matt. Anyone else here to speak on this one tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. Jeff Griffin, President of the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce. I'm just here briefly to level set that the Chamber of Commerce, we are completely in support of this for reasons already mentioned. When we look at the reach that we can have into the entrepreneur ecosystem, collaborations in this community resonate. All communities talk about collaboration, but not everybody does it well. We have just over 1,900 members in our Chamber of Commerce, which puts us in the 99th percentile based on population in the entire country. So we have a tremendous amount of private support. The unique services offered by Startup Sioux Falls for people with the entrepreneur and the dream, and folks willing to volunteer and donate their time to help with the coaching and to provide those connections is going to be very valuable. And Brianne mentioned some of the successes we've had in the community, and big employers start as very small employers. So we see this as a another major tool in our toolbox. Our young professionals group continues to explode. So Chamber stands by in support of this. And if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Anyone else here to speak on item 39? All right, council, any questions for any of these folks that are here, for Sean, anyone else on this? Councilor Brecky, go ahead.
Question for Sean. Tonight was the first night I heard about that provision about the naming rights.
Mm-hmm.
What's contemplated there? It kind of sent up a red flag to me. Is it naming rights to go with the use of the building for the lease, or permanent naming rights? Because it's permanent naming rights, it would seem to be odd to me that we delegate that to somebody else.
It's not permanent naming rights, so I think I had a bullet point, but I failed to mention in the presentation, naming rights cannot exceed the term of the lease. And okay. So there'd have to be a fail-safe provision if the city were to acquire back its interest in the improvements related to so it can only coalesce with the occupancy of the building for that time period.
Is what's contemplated in that, they're going to advertise their business. Right now, they're kind of switching from Zeal to Startup Sioux Falls, that the likely naming rights we're talking about here is a way to identify their business opportunity while they're under the lease agreement.
It'll be an opportunity to essentially, like most of our naming rights, garner some equity or capital, which would be utilized by Startup Sioux Falls in order to build out the improvements that they're intending for the facility.
Oh, okay, so it might be advertising something else.
Yes, I mean, it likely will be some sort of third party that would come in and do the naming rights for that.
And maybe I should turn over to Stacy, and there's no problem, because that's literally, we're delegating our naming rights responsibility over them. I realize that it's subject to our approval, but that's just a little unusual. I don't know that we've ever done that before. So
we've done it pretty regularly. I mean, certainly from the zoo's perspective, we delegate naming rights. Again, it has to follow the naming rights ordinance, and that's where the key thing is. Everything comes back. Whenever it's associated with a city-owned facility or property, it has to flow through the naming rights ordinance for approval. So for example, if the Washington Pavilion enters into a naming rights agreement for this or that, they receive the benefit of that and receive that. Now that benefits us because we subsidize the Washington Pavilion, but in essence, they do utilize naming rights to support the operations and basically support having the Washington Pavilion. Another example would be the zoo. The example with the Premier Center is a little bit different because we have a vested interest in their accounts. So they're third-party managed, but that one's a little bit different. But on regular occasion, we have, I can tell you the baseball stadium lease from 20 years ago has naming rights included in that lease
Okay,
at that
so
time.
then it's something we have done from time to time.
It is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Sean while we got him up here? Counselor Starr?
Yes, thank you, Director Pritchett. What was the appraised value, or what was the value that was used on the building during the exchange in 2004?
Since that predates me by a very long time, I'm not entirely sure. But when that occurred, you know, that was, I don't know the answer to that question. I can look that up and certainly have that for you by when we meet for this for second reading. I would say it would probably be fairly significantly different than what it is today. And I believe the value of this building will be significantly more 10 years from now as a result of all the development that we're going to see in that area.
So do we have an appraised value as of today? Or as of when we started this process, did we at least have the building appraised and take a look at what it was
Since we were
worth?
not selling the building, we didn't have it appraised.
So then we wouldn't have an idea of what the estimated property value would be. Does the county have an assessed value on it?
As a tax exempt property, it probably does not have a tax exempt.
Sometimes they do and sometimes they
I'd
don't.
have to look at that as well.
Um,
But I would guarantee it would not be anywhere near its market value.
Absolutely. So then what other evaluation did we do? Because you were pretty adamant that we won't have a use for this building. We haven't had a use for this building for a considerable amount of time. We planned on selling it as part of the building, the administration building was part of a number of city buildings that were ready to be sold. And again, change in administration, we haven't looked at, you know, selling some of those assets to pay off the bonds. That was one of the assurances that the public was given, is that some of these excess properties would be sold and that'd be one way to generate cash. Luckily, we're not in a position where we have to generate that cash to make those payments as quickly, but give me an idea of how this process went to make sure that we don't need this building for the next 10 years.
Well, one of the things we look at is just what our needs are for administrative standpoint, right? So as we continue to grow as a city, that's not to say that we might not need additional space. But then COVID kind of changed space allocations and needs as well. Sure. And that's going to continue to evolve probably over the next several years. So is there a point where we won't need additional space? Probably, but as far as whether this location is the best use of that space for city administrative purposes, I guess I would leave that to probably somebody else, but I could argue probably not. As far as, obviously I was not here when the city center was approved or built, and that predates this current administration, so I can't speak to, you know, whether that was said to have been an option to sell that building. You know, certainly we've looked at different opportunities. Most recently, the council approved the sale of a surface parking lot. One of the things that I would say is a little bit different between these type of properties and the sale of those is the surface parking lot is in a fairly good, it's in good condition for redevelopment, right? It's a blank slate that you can start from. This property comes with a number of encumbrances that come along with it, right? So you've got a historic building that we as a city, I think, from a public perspective, have a vested interest in seeing protected and continued into the future for future generations. We have encumbrances from a 40-year lease on the parking with Raven. And then we have to look at our opportunities with the Levitt and the way the Levitt was built, the ingress and egress out of the staging area. It's very important that that area has to remain open and available for the large equipment that needs to go in there to support the Levitt, as well as I believe that parking is utilized during Levitt evenings to support people that are handicapped and provide them accessibility to that asset for our city. So those are things that we have to take into consideration. if it's optimal to sell. And again, one of the things I would say is when we look at this, what we do know now is we do know what's going to happen in terms of development of that area of downtown that is turning significantly and transforming that area. And so highest and best use of what that property looks like 10 years from now or 5 years from now is hard to contemplate at this point because it could be significantly different than what we believe it is right currently.
Is one of the other things that you mentioned during your presentation was the historic value of the property. Is it on the historic registry? What would be involved if someone chose to, we needed flat space rather than a building at that point to expand the Levitt or to
again,
do those kind of things?
I believe it is on the historic registry. I know that we have been working to coordinate between Startup Sioux Falls and our historic preservation office and the historic preservation to ensure that we will make all the guidelines for that. Presently, you know, when it comes to interior reconstruction, they probably won't have a lot of say in that because it doesn't really reflect the historic nature of the building. Certainly all of the interior stuff has been already changed over time. When it comes to replacement of windows, that might trigger something of that. We've already talked about signage, and that probably is not going to be a challenge either, just as long as, again, whatever is put up can be removed without damaging the building.
Thank you.
All right, other questions for Sean? Councilor Neitzer, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to speak with absolute authority because this goes back several years, but and again, I have to look at records. I don't know that I recall that there was any assertion that we would sell that building. I think, in fact, there was discussion that there would be an interest in, well, first of all, waiting and seeing how things played out, but also, and something I'd have a concern with is a building in that location, that close to the Levitt, there's an interest in having control over it. Whereas if we're to release it, we may not know what kind of use goes in there, and then we may have some serious concerns or compatibility issues. So I don't remember. I don't think it was stated we would sell it, but it's a valid question as far as the property value. But I think you brought up some very good points, and then in addition, what I just stated, I think there's a definite city issue from just a logistics standpoint with the Levitt, and then losing control potentially of what happens at a very prominent location, literally on the doorstep of one of our city parks and in an event space. Did you look and see, and I should mention, as I've thought about this is much like, I had to pull out the budget books because when I first got on the council, we entered into a 5-year agreement with Forward Sioux Falls, $400,000 annually. I think that's maybe just coming up for renewal here. And it shows in the 2022 book, it's $500,000 in the budget book. So obviously, we make a major contribution in that sense. And then the Sioux Falls Development Foundation 2022 is $281,875. And as Matt Paulson talked about, there's multiple legs to the stool. So I guess when I think about this, whether to support it or not, really what it comes down to is it's kind of an in-kind donation of space, much like we're doing with the Link. We could have sold that building, for example, the city annex, but one of our ways to help to fund something that's important to us is to provide it the building, essentially. So do you agree with, maybe you haven't looked into it, with Mr. Paulson's assessment as to what the lease revenue potential could be? Because that's really kind of what we're potentially foregoing if we don't sell it, notwithstanding the improvements that we would capture potentially at the end of the lease. You got to correct for that, and the fact of, maintenance and all that stuff. If we leave it, there's got to be some overhead cost for us just to keep it from deteriorating, even vacant. So anyway, do we have an idea what exactly we're essentially donating in kind, a number?
I don't think that Matt's assessment is too far off. I mean, the lease rate, it is a prime piece of property, and the lease rate could be even a little bit higher than that. But we do contemplate, what I don't disagree with, and part of my assessment with this is the $1 million investment into the property to take care of the interior is really critical. And so I think, when you consider that prorates out to about $100,000 a year, in terms of its investment, something that the city will inherit and own at the end of the lease. And then you look at the public good portion of this. And then you also look at the retention of options of what we look at 5 to 10 years, what the new highest and best use of that property might be at some point in the future, because we retain our options relative to that. And really, we should be interested in, again, programming and also walkability, and not every business or potential use of that space is going to create that kind of positive economic or neighborhood activity that we think would be positive from Startup Sioux Falls locating there.
Related, I don't know if there was any unsolicited, people approaching or any, I had thought at some point, well, maybe if we control it, kind of like we do with like over at the Holiday Inn, we're getting some revenue off of the Crooked Pint, if there'd be some opportunity to let a restaurant lease it. I mean, have you pursued that? Have you saw some market potential? I mean, obviously you can't just make money on events, but it's a prime location. So, maybe that would have been an option that, I don't know if anybody looked at that in the last couple of years.
I think there'd been some unsolicited, potential inquiries into it, whether it's a for-profit agency or a nonprofit that would be in a similar circumstance where they'd probably want some sort of subsidized rate for the use of the building. But I think none of those options that I think we really saw coming before us were really ones that created programming and activation of that space, and I think that's the critical piece. I think at some point when Steel District is developed in that area, then you're probably going to see a restaurant or something that really complements Jacobson Plaza and the whole development of the Steel District as a potential optimal use of that. So I think there's going to be other opportunities that create that same kind of atmosphere of that area, but we need to watch that area of the community develop. And at this point, it's an expense for us. It's not a revenue generator for us because it's vacant and we're covering the utilities and the maintenance. And my concern is that if we continue to leave it vacant, you'll see the building degrade from non-use.
Thank you.
Other questions for Sean or any of the startup folks? All right, let's get a motion on the table. Set a date of second reading for Tuesday, January 11.
So move, Jensen.
Second, Kylie.
All right, motion by Jensen, seconded by Kylie. Discussion amongst council on this? Councilor Sale, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would encourage my council mates to move this to a second reading for these reasons that I have determined that we will retain ownership of this building, and in 10 years, I believe it'll be extremely valuable, a lot more valuable than it is today, and with the improvements. And also this council has consistently supported small business and startups. And as some of the speakers pointed out, where would we be today if we didn't have the big businesses that started at small businesses? So I encourage my council mates to move this to a second reading. And if there are questions in the meantime, I'm sure the speakers could answer any of the questions you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's take a vote on this to send it to a second reading.
Council members Kylie,
Yes.
Neitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, that's going to pass 8-0. Council, any new business tonight? Is there any new business? You got it. Okay, Councilor Neitzer, go ahead.
I'll defer to Councilor Brecky.
Councilor Brecky, go ahead.
Counselor Brecky, motion to add a motion to reconsider an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by amending Chapter 39, Personnel Regulations and Benefits, Retirement and Pensions, Section 39036, Application to Appointive Officers, adopted at the City Council meeting of Tuesday, December 22nd, 2021.
Second, Neitzert.
All right. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I do. We passed a week ago, or at our last meeting, an amendment was passed that, I'm just going to use it in layman's terms, that allowed for bump back rights to appointive officials. And when I made that amendment, I was unaware that there were other appointive officials other than directors. I mean, I shouldn't say I was unaware. I've known of them, but I wasn't thinking of them when I made that appointment, or when I made that amendment. I'm not saying that we shouldn't include them. There's only a few, including some of our council-appointed officials, and then there's a couple in the mayor's office, and from time to time, there might be other positions that the city needs that it's wise to do from an appointed position rather than a higher position. But it did occur, I did find out that some of the other council members had learned of that and was just concerned that we really hadn't talked about that. And when I presented that amendment, I said, we're talking about a policy question here. This is a policy question, to encourage people to move into leadership positions. And, having given that as the backdrop, when it was brought to my attention that people would like to just kind of rediscuss it, and we just have a window of opportunity here when we can do that rather than try to bring some whole amendment forward. So I just said I'd like to bring the motion myself, bring this motion to, under new business, and then a motion to reconsider it. And then we can talk about it again at the next meeting, and we can visit about a little bit in between whether we want to extend that policy decision, makes sense to extend that to some of these additional individuals or not. And if not, then of course we can make an amendment, or we're still free to say, hey, we do want them included now that we've discussed it, and leave it as is. So that's the purpose of the motion.
Got it. So this will be a motion just to reconsider, and then we'll have a following motion to set a date to listen to, for when we will reconsider this. So, okay.
Correct.
So this is pretty benign. This is just a vote to reconsider this. Let's take a vote on this, please.
Councilmember Kiley,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, so the motion to reconsider it is passed. So now you can introduce the actual motion to when we'll reconsider this, or how we'll reconsider this, I guess.
Thank you. Councilor Brecky, motion to reconsider an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by amending Chapter 39, Personnel Regulations and Benefits, Retirement and Pensions, Section 39.036, Application to Appointive Officers, adopted at the City Council meeting of Tuesday, December 21st, 2021, and to defer formal action to the meeting of Tuesday, January 11th, 2022.
Second, Nitzert.
All right, motion by Brecky, seconded by Neitzer to consider this item again next week at our meeting on the 11th. Discussion on that? All right, hearing none, let's vote on that then, please.
Councilmembers Kiley,
Yes.
Nitzert,
Yes.
Selberg,
Yes.
Sale,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Brecky,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Jensen.
Yes.
All right, that's going to pass 8-0. All right, any other new business? All right, seeing none, we'll move to public input. Just a reminder, 3 minutes per person, and on topics we didn't talk about earlier. Anyone for general public input tonight? Come on up, man.
I was inspired to use props. Good evening. My name is Chad Bishop. I live at 7405 South Valencia Drive here in Sioux Falls. I was disappointed that I missed Dr. Chima's COVID-19 update presentation to this body December 21st. I did listen to the entire 37 minutes and 51 seconds of his presentation. I would like to commend Dr. Chima on a number of points. First, just the service he and his staff have provided to our community. Second, the consistent message of caution and not fear. Third, we are lucky to be living in the greatest country on earth and to have the resources that we do, and to have a vaccine or vaccines that have been as effective as they have been in preventing the most severe outcomes of COVID-19. We also agree that it is understandable why there is concern and for people to ask how we came up with these vaccines so quickly. Dr. Chima attributes this to American ingenuity. In part, I agree. However, if concern is reasonable, it is reasonable to ask why the FDA is arguing it will take at least 55 years for them to review and release the documents that made up the licensure submission from Pfizer-BioNTech, when it only took 103 days to review and approve the submission in the first place. In the question and answer period, when Councilor Kiley inquired about the COVID-19 recovery, Dr. Chima acknowledged that the logic is understandable, but argued that immunity induced through infection was less consistent. Again, our own Department of Health has reported less than a 1% reinfection rate for the COVID-19 recovered over 22 months from their own empirical data. Dr. Chima also argued that the natural infection is fighting against last year's infection. The obvious follow-up question would have been, what were the current vaccines on offer developed against last year's infection, right? In addition, he doesn't mention the research that shows B cells created during natural infection continue to evolve to become more potent and able to block immune-evading variants. It is the reality that more of the largest cities in the country have adopted a policy of medical apartheid, based not upon science, but upon compliance. In addition to New York, we now have Chicago, Boston, and Washington, D.C. implementing medical apartheid. Because they successfully have framed this discussion as the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated instead of the immune versus the unimmune. You have also fallen into this artificial and divisive framing. I am sad to say that in his update, Dr. Chima did not once mention community immunity and did not include the COVID-19 recovered in any estimate provided then. Last week, the President, Dr. Fauci, and Senator Feinstein all floated the idea of mandating vaccines for domestic air travel. The purported impetus for the mandates, for firings, for violation of civil rights, and for the implementation of medical apartheid in the United States of America is to prevent the spread to the vulnerable who might succumb. Could fully vaccinated U.S. Senators Booker and Warren spread the virus once infected? Dr. Fauci informs us the viral load in breakthrough Delta cases is nearly identical to that of the unvaccinated. What does that make now? 5 fully vaccinated U.S. Senators having breakthrough cases. That's 5% breakthrough just in the U.S. Senate. For the record, didn't get to my prop. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Chad. Anyone else here to speak tonight?
Greetings. I'm David Zalkaitis, and we've got a hot topic of food deserts, and so that's what I'm addressing tonight. Good to start with the definition. A food desert is just a big area inside a city, usually in a poor part of town, where it's hard to get to a grocery store. Simple definition. And these things exist because, well, grocery stores move out of rough parts of town because they don't make any money. That's pretty much all there is to it. Economic survival means that they have to move out of places where you can't make money. And that's life in modern America. So these have impacts. The food desert has impacts to the residents in that area. It's harder to get healthy food. It's a particular problem if you don't have a car, because, you know, if you walking a mile to a grocery store or 2 miles to a grocery store is a bit of a trip. And trying to haul that on your back, and if you're taking a bus, it's just hard on people. And if you can't get good food, well, then you're not as healthy, and you end up with, you know, health problems. Governments can provide services to residents. The startup, for example, that's a way to provide services. Well, here's another way to provide a service to the residents of Sioux Falls. Healthy food is really good for people, and if you have healthy food and a healthy life, you get a healthier city. So what we could do to convert a food desert into a food oasis is to provide a public-private partnership and to provide a subsidy for the grocery stores that might want to locate to those areas. And there are some other things we might want to do to improve food security, like removing the sales tax on food and provide for urban agriculture and encourage front yard gardens. I happened to locate a map of food deserts in Sioux Falls from the USDA, and there's quite a few areas that are not well populated with big grocery stores. Certainly spots that we could take care of if we decided we wanted to. One last slide, of course, you know, but this one's a little different. Kale in December, there are some plants out there that really hold on to life. And kale is one of them, so have a good evening, everybody.
All right, thank you. Anyone else here to speak tonight?
Sioux Falls. I'm speaking on behalf of the West 10th Street Neighborhood Association. On behalf of the residents in the area of the recent Hy-Vee store closure, I would like to briefly address the mayor and city council. We have submitted a petition to mayor and the city council on behalf of residents impacted by the Kiwanis Hy-Vee closure. The number of signatures show the impact and concern to local residents who have been dependent on a grocery store at this central location for over 30 years, and their main source for food and essential time items. Hy-Vee has removed access and affordability for those who really need it. The closest stores from Kiwanis Hy-Vee or going north past Benson Road is the 60th Street Walmart, which is 5.3 miles from 10th and Kiwanis. Going west-southwest to Marion Road, Hy-Vee is almost 3 miles, 2.7. Going west to 41st Street to Walmart is 3.2 miles. Going east-southeast is Minnesota Avenue, Hy-Vee, which is 3.7 miles. Many elderly and disabled are now at a loss to accessing transportation to another grocery store at these distances. Those impacted, this story is important to the firefighters who cook for the first responders at their stations, as well as Air National Guard troops who shop there. Those impacted were nonprofit organizations. Hy-Vee closing creates a food desert and strains area nonprofits. Those impacted, many in the area walk or bicycle, many have small children, many are single mothers, elderly, and disabled. Those impacted are apartment owners and tenants who an important must-have when apartment hunting often involves the presence of a store within a few blocks. Owners and tenants of the numerous apartment complexes which Kiwanis Hy-Vee served will also help the impact of the store closure. Those impacted, those with no access to vehicle, who walk to the store, who will not have no way of transportation. The closest store is 3 miles. Sioux Falls has 6 recognized food deserts by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where a grocery store is more than a mile from low-income neighborhood. Hy-Vee stores closure adds another food desert in the central neighborhood based on high concentrations of low-income rental properties. And I'm going to stop right there. Now, I'm gonna warn the people because my mouth is golden. If we have a protest on systematic racism, we're gonna go to the battlefield on it. There are some individuals that want to start a protest and take over this neighborhood. I will speak at public input more on this next week.
Anyone else to speak tonight? Come on up, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Chester DeYoung. I live at 4908 East Grant Street. I know that there are at least 4 members on this committee I have tried to call. Nobody wants to return my phone call. The latest information I can give you is the City of Sioux Falls has design standards for road construction, pavement thickness. That standard has nothing for gravel roads in it at all. When I had my last meeting with Andy Berg in November, he said, you're right, we cannot construct a gravel road inside city limits, but we're going to do it anyway. In fact, they started that road yesterday. If any contractor, which I was for 40 years in the city of Sioux Falls, wanted to construct a road this time of year, the city would say, you can't do it because there's frost in the ground. You have to remove the frost before you can even start the construction of a road. The city of Sioux Falls put this gravel road in. Oh, wait a second. They're not constructing a gravel road. They are connecting a blacktop street to a gravel street, and there's 90 feet of grass in between. They're not going to construct a gravel road. They're connecting it, and they put 9 truckloads of crushed gravel, crushed asphalt, on top of frozen surface, and they said, there's nothing you can do about it because we're the city engineers. We don't care. We're going to do what we want. As a board, I think you guys should keep an eye on what your engineers are really trying to do. I know they've got reasons for it, but they're going outside of their own standards in order to complete it. During the discussion phase of opening this road up, I brought up the fact that the road that they're opening is going to exceed the limitations of their own design standards for Taylor Street. Taylor Street is 3 blocks long. If you take a look at their own design standards, it said that it can only handle 140 cars, I believe. They're going to throw in excess of 210 cars on that 210 residents. Traffic count was supposed to come in at 1,100, and they're going to throw 2,400. There is nobody, no contractor, no city engineer in the city of Sioux Falls that could even construct that without city's permission. And yet the city says, we're going to do it anyway. We don't care. So I think just for the board's own knowledge, they should be aware of this. I'm not happy about it, but somebody once told me the only way to get anything done is go through city council. You can't argue with city hall, but you guys are city hall. So I hope you take a look at it. I appreciate your time. You have a great night. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Anyone else for public input tonight? All right, motion to adjourn us out?
So moved, Jensen. Second, Kylie.
All right, all those in favor say yes?
Yes. Yes.
Opposed?
Yes.
All right, we're adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.